Okay. So Shivam, you have started recording, right?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so let's get started. So today's presentation, I'm going to be talking about Cloud Foundry. And this is the traditional slides, right? I'm sure you have seen the slides before. So in ages past, maybe like 10 years ago or so, this was our infrastructure. So you had the traditional IT, and you see the stack right here, and you were managing the entire stack. So someone in your company was always doing like the networking, the storage. So when you develop software, you had to worry about this entire stack, starting from networking, storage, service, getting the servers, installing the OS, installing the middleware, installing the runtime, data, applications. And usually in like 10 years ago, the life cycle of software was also like it would take like a year before you release a software. So even today with on-premise softwares, that is the case. You still have like a longer life cycle. But as we move towards the cloud-focused applications, so what we see is we have the IaaS provider. So there are a lot of companies like AWS, Azure, and so on that can give you this bottom stack for you. So you don't have to worry about any of these things. They take care of the storage, the servers, and all of that good stuff. Now, all you have to do is focus on building the applications, getting the runtime installed, the data, and so on. But your job has reduced quite a bit. And this translates into faster life cycle for software development as well. Now, there is this concept of PaaS, which is, and this takes it a little bit more. We are talking about Cloud Foundry, but there are other platform as a service as well. They do a lot more, and they also take care of the runtime, the middleware, and so on. Now, all you have to do is focus on creating your applications and your data. This is the scenario that we have right now with cloud-focused applications, and I'll show you how easy it is in Cloud Foundry to create an application. So before we start, quick introduction of Cloud Foundry. So Cloud Foundry is open source, like you already know. And the key thing here that you need to understand about Cloud Foundry is that it is multi-cloud. So this Cloud Foundry software can be installed in AWS, it can be installed in Azure, it can be installed in your own rack, or it can be installed in your company's stack. So it can be anywhere. And that's the beauty of it. You're not tied to a IaaS vendor. So say you are using Cloud Foundry on Azure, you don't like it, you can move to AWS Cloud Foundry because you're not tied to the IaaS. This Cloud Foundry can run on any of these IaaS. It was originally developed by VMware, and then it was spun off to Pivotal, and then Pivotal just recently got acquired by VMware, so it's back with VMware. But like I said, it's open source. Anyone can contribute to it. Anyone can do what they want with it. So I already said that it is multiple infrastructure support. So you can install it in your own hardware, or you can install it in AWS, Azure, OpenStack, vSphere, wherever you want, you can install. And because of that, you're not locked into any specific app or services. So it is ideal for building applications on the cloud. And I'll kind of, you will kind of understand how easy it is to build applications in the next couple of slides. Okay, so let's say your boss comes to you. So you have a software that is that you've created. Your boss comes to you and says, "Hey, you know what? We just signed a deal with Azure. So we have all the infrastructure from Azure. Go ahead and deploy the application on the Azure virtual machines." So before you deploy the application, you start making a checklist of what all needs to be done, right? So the first thing you probably want to do on the IIS is you may want to provision a virtual machine. So you need some place to run your application, so you want to provision a virtual machine. Next thing you may want to do is you may want to install the application runtime on this virtual machine. So for example, if your application is a Java application, then you would install the JRE. Then you go ahead and bundle up your application, you deploy the application. And these are the checklists, right? And then you probably want to configure a load balancer so that you can balance the load, assuming the application everyone is using it. You may want to configure SSL termination so that the backend server, you reduce the load on the backend server. You may want to connect, like say your application may connect to an Oracle database, so you need to configure the service connectivity and so on. So you need to do that as well. You may want to configure a firewall, and the list goes on and on. So this is by no means an exhaustive list. So there could be additional items that you may want to do as well. But I was just trying to give you an idea of all the stuff that you would need to do to take your application that you have built to deploy to an to a IaaS provider. Say it's AWS or Azure, it doesn't matter. But you still have to go through all these steps. Now let's see how you do this in Cloud Foundry, right? So in Cloud Foundry, all you have to do is run this command cf push, and that's all. And it takes care of all these stuff that I have mentioned on the left-hand side. This single command cf push will do all of this for you. Now, if anybody asks you, what did you learn in this session? I want you to at least remember this, right? CF push. So that's the key takeaway from this session. If you know CF push, then you know Cloud Foundry, like at least 50% of it. So all you have to remember is CF push, and this will do everything. It will take your application, it will push it, it will configure the load balancer, it will do the SSL termination, everything that is required to run a production app. Okay, so what I'm going to do is let me quickly show you so that you don't think that I'm bullshitting. So let me go to, and you can still see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to open Visual Studio Code. And I'm in this folder called CF. So I'm in this folder called CF. And inside of CF, I have two folders. I see Node and PHP. So if I do dir, you'll see that there is a folder called Node, and there is a folder called PHP. Now, I have no idea of PHP, right? Like, I don't know anything about PHP. I've never worked with PHP. But I copied this from the internet. So there is this one file that I just copied, and it looks pretty straightforward. Even if you don't know any kind of programming, you should kind of understand that this echoes out my first PHP application. So nothing significant. So we're not actually learning PHP, we are learning how to do Cloud Foundry. So right now I'm on the CF folder, and what I want to do is I want to go into this PHP folder. So I do cd PHP. Now, like I said, right, the command that I need to run is CF push, but I did make a mistake there. I should say CF push. And I also need to give a name for this application. So you need to learn CF push and the name. So just don't say CF push, right? So let's say my awesome PHP. So that's the name that I give for my application. And then I hit enter. And if all goes well, this should get deployed to the Cloud Foundry. Oops. Okay, I need to log in. So give me 1 second. Let me log into my account. I thought I had logged in. Okay, so let's start all over again. So CF, now that I'm logged in, CF push my awesome PHP. So this my awesome PHP is the name of the application that I'm giving. So let's see what it's doing. It's trying to push my awesome app to the Cloud Foundry. So this is my Cloud Foundry organization and space, and it is it's giving a route. So what it's doing is it creates a route for my application automatically so that I can use this route to actually get to this application, so I can run this application. And then this route is bound to my application. So it created this route and it bound this route to my application. So when I go to this URL, I can hit this page. And then what it's doing is you can see that it's downloading a whole bunch of Buildpacks. So you can see that it's downloading all these Buildpacks. Now, if you noticed, for anybody who is paying attention, so this is a PHP application. But in my CF push, I gave a name, awesome PHP, but I didn't even tell what language I wrote this application in. I just said CF push, and then I just gave a name of this application. So this Cloud Foundry, it doesn't know what language it is. So it's downloading all these Buildpacks, and it will automatically detect what language this application is. And it's downloading all these things. And if you notice, it will find that it kind of detects that it's PHP. So it's doing an install.
Milton, sorry to interrupt you. One question
yes.
here. Actually, I think the first time you are executing this command here, so that's why maybe it is downloading all the build pack. Like the next time when we try to push any Ruby on Rails application, like Ruby application, it is not going to download each and everything, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to push the same application again, then it already knows that it is a PHP application. But now it needs to detect what application it is. So it will download all the build packs and it will figure out what the application is, and then it will install the necessary dependencies for this application.
Okay.
But that's a good question. Yeah. So it figures out that it's PHP. So it installs PHP for me. And not only that, it creates a container. So for those of you already know, but that's the fashion, right, in cloud applications. It's not just you put your application in like some machine that everybody uses. No, you don't do that. You create your own container, and then this container is isolated in terms of memory, CPU, and disk. So only your application is running in this container. And it's and you can have multiple containers in an operating system, but your container is isolated just for your application. So it does that, and it does what is called staging. Once you have the build pack, it has what it's staging, and the output of the staging is a droplet. So droplet, think of that as the image. So this is the image that it builds. So it builds this image, and then it uploads this image, this droplet into the container, and then it starts up this container. So it did all of this for you. And the funny thing is, I don't even have the proper runtime to run PHP application on my machine. I just copied this off the internet, and this I can't even run this on my application, on my own machine, on my own laptop. But I have pushed it to the cloud in less than 30 seconds, right? So pushed it and it's working and everything. And it's bound to this route. So if I take this route here, and if I go into, let's say, my Chrome browser, and if I run this, I should see the application, my first PHP application. I mean, because this application was just like a Hello World application. Again, it's not the application itself, but the process in which we built it, right? Now, I know this is a PHP application. I also have a Node application. So let's see whether it works the same way for Node, right? So I'll go up one folder, and I will go into the Node folder. So now I'm inside of the Node folder, and I will do a CF push, and I'll say my awesome node, and I click enter, and it goes through the same process again. It will push my awesome node into the Cloud Foundry. Again, it creates a route. It binds that route to my application. It downloads the Buildpacks. Then it figures out what language this application is written in. You notice it came back pretty fast because it probably already had those Buildpacks cached. And it figures out that it is a Node application. It installs the dependencies, because in Node you could have the npm stings, the stuff that you have to install. It installs all the dependencies, and sure enough, this application is running. And if I go into my Node thing, I have an endpoint called hello. So if I add this, if I take this URL, and if I go here and I add hello to it, then it should give me hello from Express or something. Yeah, sure enough, it is working. Now we also have a cockpit where you can see if the application actually did get deployed. So if I go into my cockpit here and I hit refresh, and you can see that there is my awesome Node application and my awesome PHP application. And I can go in here and you can see that it is running, and sure enough, the PHP application is also running. So let me go back to the slides, right? Oops, someone is waiting. Oh, no, it's not waiting. Let me go back to my slides. Okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to take like a moment to let this sink in, right? To sink in what you've just seen. Here you have this, all you had to do was do CF push, and this did everything for you. The way Cloud Foundry works behind the scenes is it knows that there are some applications, like all the applications or most of the applications, they all have some common needs, and there's no reason to spend man hours trying to do that, because if you had to do this all manually, like configure this load balancer, configure SSL termination and stuff like that, it would take you like days, right? So the idea of Cloud Foundry is I will abstract it. So the Cloud Foundry platform software is saying, I will take care of all of this. You, as a developer, you simply focus on adding business value to your application. So instead of writing Hello World application like I did, you spend your time writing fancy applications, right? And that's probably what we want. We want to be focusing on adding business value instead of doing mundane stuff that needs to be repeated over and over and over again, right? There's no reason for us to be doing that. We should be using our intelligence to build applications that provide value to the community or to the business itself. Now, scaling an application. So we looked at deploying an application, right? Now, scaling an application pretty much follows the same paradigm as well. If you had to scale your application, then you probably would do the same thing on the IIS. You would get a new virtual machine. You would install the application run. You would deploy the application. You would configure the load balancer, SSL termination, service connectivity. You do pretty much the same same thing. Again, the list is not complete, but in Cloud Foundry, all you have to do is say CF scale, and that's pretty much all you have to do. So, for example, I can just come here to my application here. I have already pushed my Node application. Let's say there's a lot of demand for my Node application. Everybody wants to see the Hello World application. So I just say CF scale, my awesome Node. So that's the name of my application. -I for the instance, and let's say I want 2 instances of it. And this will scale it up with 2 instances. So as straightforward as that. And you pretty much, it takes care of everything here. And the same URL that you had before, you can still access. So the same URL that you were using, you can still access. Now you have 2 instances. The load balancer can kind of redirect the load to each instance, right? So all of this with just the CF scale command. Okay, so Amazon. Yes, Preeti, go ahead.
Sorry. So you mentioned that if you can go one slide back. So you mentioned that it takes care of all the application runtime, load balancing, firewall, all of that. So it's like kind of a black box for us, whatever it does in the background. So I'm not from DevOps background, but wanted to know like how much feasible it is to use Cloud Foundry in like organizations right now. How many are they using them? And being a black box, is it good to use something of this sort wherein or is there an option to even configure the load balancing and all of that stuff in case if you require it, or it's completely a black box for us?
Yeah, so it is not a completely a black box. So you can change the parameters. You can add, say if you wanted to use a different kind of a build pack, you can use it, and I'll kind of show you how you can do that. Even the router, you can have different ways of configuring it. But for the most part, whatever we provide, like whatever, yeah, I mean, it's right now you can change the amount of memory the application is using. You can change the VM it's using. So it is all configurable, but it's configurable in a very, very easy manner. So it's yeah. Whereas with other solutions, I feel that you have to do a lot more to accomplish the same thing that you do with Cloud Foundry. With Cloud Foundry, it makes it so much easier, and even all the configuration is easy as well. It's just that they want you to focus on your business needs, right?
Okay.
And I'll kind of show you some little configurations, but yeah.
Yeah. Are they using Cloud Foundry? Many organizations right now, commercial organizations.
Yes, there is a big community following. I know SAP is big into Cloud Foundry. There are a lot of Capgemini, Accenture. Like there are the last slide shows you all the companies that are into it. That slide is like 3-4 years old, so the list is kind of outdated. Now there is the industry itself favors Kubernetes at this moment, right? So everybody is like a big fan of Kubernetes. Cloud Foundry is a close second, but it's a second. So what Cloud Foundry has done recently, and I don't have any slides to show that. What they have done is they've taken Kubernetes, and because Kubernetes itself is an open source thing, and they've incorporated that into their solution now. So it's kind of so it's always evolving, right? So Cloud Foundry itself now, underlying it uses Kubernetes. So and since everyone uses Kubernetes, I think Cloud Foundry will have like a bright future now.
Okay, great.
I mean, even now, yeah, quite a few companies are using Cloud Foundry. Okay, so with
Awesome.
Can I ask one quick question too?
Yeah, sure.
So like in our Docker session, we had those Docker files to build containers, the Mongo node, and we'd download those packages and then create a container and then push it. So in Cloud Foundry, you don't need to do all of that?
Yeah, remember all the stuff, all the like trouble that we had to go through to build the container image, and it didn't work, and then we had to.
So if our application uses a node, it needs Mongo, and it needs say something else, React or whatever, it'll download everything.
Yeah, so I'll show that. Yeah, I'll show you how we can get to that. Yes. So this is a quote from Amazon, right? So in Amazon, before, what you would do is, like if you are a developer, let me go to the screen here. So you create the application, and then you throw it over to the operations team, and then the operations team is the one that's actually doing like the installation, the deployment, and stuff like that. But fast forward like to today's date, and it's like now you build it, you pretty much own it, right? So again, I want you to think about it like in different angles, right? So you are building the application. Now you own the application. You can do pretty much everything. You control the application. You can even decide which language you want to build, because it gives you all that flexibility. Now the thing is, you also want to be like always improving your skill set, because if you're not in the business of building it, then what is your role in the company, right? Because now the guy who's building it, he pretty much does everything. So if you're not in that space, you also need to like kind of figure out what your role in the company is as well. Okay, so kind of behind the scenes, what the hell happens when you do the CF push? So when you do the CF push, so this command line interface, there is a cloud controller in Cloud Foundry. That's the main thing. And it has some REST APIs that are exposed. Now, this CF push is able to talk to this cloud controller and tells that, hey, this is the app that I want to push, and it bundles up this app, sends it down to this cloud controller. Now, the cloud controller, it is the controller, right? So it can control everything. So it figures out, it gets all the build packs, and it figures out the appropriate build pack to use, and then it creates a droplet, and it stores this droplet. Droplet is the image, right? So it stores the droplet in this blob store, and then this the cell is like the virtual machine. Like think of it where you can actually take this droplet and run it. So this Diego controls that. It takes this droplet here, and then it runs it. And then all this is wired for you, like the load balancer, the router, and everything is wired for you. And then when the user comes, it hits the load balancer, it hits the router, and it sent to the appropriate image. So that's pretty much behind the scenes what happens. And for you, you don't have to worry about all of this. CF push is all you need to worry about. Scaling, same thing. Scaling, the only thing is it doesn't have to send the application bits this time, because the cloud controller already has it. And like I said, the blob store has the droplet, right? So the image resides in this droplet, in the blob store. Cloud controller just says, you know what, Diego, go ahead and put it in a new container, and that's deployed to a new container. Okay, so now we can do it a little bit better instead of running CF push. CF push itself is easy, but there is another like recommended way of deploying applications to the cloud. So I will quickly show that. So what we can do is we can use what is called a manifest.yaml file. Now here I'm putting everything in this in the command itself, right? I put cf push and then the name of the file. But what you can also do is you can go create a new file called manifest.yaml, and you can provide all of the information here in this YAML file, and then you can just say cf push, so you don't even have to give the application name. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and delete these apps, so we start from scratch. So if I go into my applications, I should see My Awesome Node. I'm going to delete My Awesome Node, and I'm also going to delete My Awesome PHP. So I've deleted both these applications. They no longer exist. But I'm going to create this manifest.yaml file, and it's fairly simple. So you start with 3 dashes, and then you can have a comment. And what I'm going to do is, in the interest of time, since I'm running a little short, so I'll just copy and paste it, and you can see that it is not too hard. So what I'm doing is I'm doing a little bit of configuration, right? Like I'm saying, hey, you know what? I need one instance. I need to use 128 megs of memory, and now I can go into the CF CD. Let me go into the PHP folder. I go into the PHP folder, and then I can just do cf push. Now cf push, now I don't have to provide the name of the application, because the name of the application is already in my in this YAML file. It can pick it up from there, and it will use 128 megs. And all this configuration, like I said, Preeti, we can put it here, like anything and everything we want, we can put it here. And I'm just going to say cf push, and this will go ahead and push my PHP application. Now, if you notice, we have 2 applications here. So I have a Node application, and I have a PHP application as well. Now, I don't want to create 2 manifest.yaml file and then be pushing it 2 times. So what I can do is I can create a manifest.yaml file here in this location itself. I can create a new manifest.yaml file here, and I can give the same information for both in the same file. So I can just do one cf push, and it will push both my PHP and my Node application. So it makes it even more easier. So you have like multiple, if you're building like 10 microservices, you can have just one manifest.yaml file, and then you can push all the 10 with one cf push command. Again, in the interest of time, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this this manifest.yaml file here, and it's fairly simple. So if you noticed in the previous one, I said applications, then I gave the name, the instances, and memory. Now this instances and memory, I'm going to keep it the same for both my applications, for my Node and for my PHP. So what I can do is I can bring it on top. So that means it's going to be common for both my applications. And then I give a name. Now I have to give a path because I'm here in this folder. It doesn't, like, I need to tell where my Node application is. So I say Node. Now this random route, this is optional, but what it will do is it will create, instead of this My Awesome app, it will randomly have like a URL. Now, if we used Heroku before, you will notice Heroku also does the same thing. So Cloud Foundry borrowed that from Heroku. It'll come up with some fancy name. So that way, when you're using shared resources, everyone gets a proper URL. Again, you can just leave this if you want, but I'm just showing you that you can add this as well. But you have to put the path, because now you have 2 applications and you need to decide where this application is. And what I'll do is, because I already deployed My Awesome app, I'm going to delete this, because I don't want. So there's no applications here, and I have this file here, and let me go to the root folder because right now I'm in the PHP folder. So I go into the root folder, and then in the root folder I can go ahead and I can do the CF push, because CF push is all you need to know in Cloud Foundry. Now this will go ahead and deploy both my Node application and also my PHP application. And if you look at the very first line, it says, or the third line, it says using manifest file. So it's using the manifest file. And like I said, because we did the random route is true, so it's giving like some fancy my awesome node, whatever it is, and it gives you this fancy name, right? So that's the URL for your application. So pretty straightforward and pretty easy to understand as well. So here, the manifest.yaml file, it gets parsed by this CLI, and then it makes calls to the Cloud Connect controller. By having a manifest.yaml file, it makes it more repeatable, less error prone. So now all you actually do is just only type in CF push. You don't even do anything else. So you don't need to send any parameters in the command line. Now, if you do send parameters in the command line, that will override what is in the manifest.yaml file. So pretty straightforward. Okay, so so far what have we learned? So Cloud Foundry definitely like a self-serve, right? Like the developers don't need to depend on anybody else. They can do their work. They can pretty much own the application. They can drive the application's future and so on. But we haven't talked about the service marketplace. I haven't talked about microservice ready as well. But you can see that you can have all these applications, all these microservices. Different teams can do it, and they don't have to worry about. They are pretty independent. They can simply build and deploy. But let's talk about service marketplace next. I think that's okay. But,
one question
yeah.
I have, when it was installing the packages, like you mentioned PHP and the Node, right?
Yes.
I saw PHP like 4.4, which is a quite old package. Right now it's PHP 7. But what I saw when you were installing it, there were some Python packages also get installed. Just like when I was when you were installing this application in the YAML file, there were also some Python packages mentioned in that list.
So it will download this because we don't specify what language it is. So it needs to detect. So the Buildpacks, the very first step of the Buildpack is to figure out what language this application is. Now, in your manifest.yaml file or even in your command line, you can specify the Buildpack yourself. And if you specify the Buildpack, it won't download all the other stuff. It will immediately use what you gave it. But what we are doing is we are telling, you know what, I'm too lazy, you figure out what the Buildpack is, what language it is, you build it for me. But you can specify your own Buildpack. And if you want, you should, I don't know all the versions. I've never worked with PHP or any of that. So I'll take your word for granted as far as the versions is concerned. But if you want the latest version, you can grab another Buildpack. You can even specify it from the GitHub itself. So you can do this, right? You can go here. You can say PHP Buildpack GitHub. So you can get this Buildpack here. So if you want the latest one, you can copy this latest Buildpack from GitHub itself, and in your manifest, you can simply add another line for your PHP application and simply point it to this Buildpack, and this will use this latest and greatest, right? But
okay,
right
like,
now,
yeah, in Node, like we in packages, and it takes the latest one, right? When you install through the Node, whatever is the latest, it takes by default. But it's not like that in Cloud Foundry,
okay.
right?
Yes. tell me again.
Like in Node, when you install the packages, it take the latest one if it is there.
Whatever is
But
there
in
the Cloud Foundry. So we'll come to Buildpacks a little late. I have a few slides in there. So I'll come to that later. So right now,
Milton, one question regarding this manifest file. So you mentioned like there are two configurable parameters like instances and memory. So with regard to that, is it like these applications which you have deployed, they are single instance application, like there cannot be like two instances, or is it like something else?
Yeah, you can have however many instances you want.
So basically, from this manifest file, you are controlling the number of instances. So it's not like based on the number of requests. So elasticity is not a feature which this provides, right? Like it's not like
there are some policies you can set that can so that can determine the scaling of it. But in this session, I'm just going to show you the manifest. It's easier for me to show this, but there are some policies you can set that will scale up and down automatically as well.
Okay. So the same goes with the memory itself, right? Both.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. I would think so. Yeah. Okay. So cloud native architecture, right? So there are differences when you're building an on-premise application and when you're building a cloud-native application. So there are some key principles. So I just one is designed for automation, right? Now, as you've seen, cloud makes it so much easier. The automate the infrastructure, scaling, monitoring, recovery, everything. It makes it, you can automate all of that. We know that, we've seen it, and the thing that we can focus now more is CI/CD, so we can even do the automation of the build, the testing, deployment of the packages, and all these big companies. That's all they do. They like every day they deploy so many packages to production. It's never, they're not waiting like months and months like it used to be before. So we can do all of that, and then with your when you're building a cloud native application, you try to be stateless whenever you can. Like, don't get attached to your image, because when you're restaging the application, Cloud Foundry will throw away that image that you have, and it will like build a new image and deploy it. So don't store like state in your image itself. Like, don't have like a local file system where you're storing every user's address and stuff like that, because that image, when you restage, it's gone. So if you want to store something, store it outside of the image, right? And then this makes it easier to scale up and down, because it builds it. Yeah, because you're building a new instance, or if your instance goes down, and if another instance is being brought to life, that may not have that file. Favor managed services. So we'll talk about managed services in the next couple of slides. But all these cloud providers, they provide like a rich set of managed services and make use of them, so you can build your applications much faster. And practice defense in depth. So with on-premise applications, you have like inside and outside, right? Like people can't even access your application because it's inside your network. But with cloud native applications, you want to make sure that you do some rate limiting, script injection. You have like different layers of defense. So you need to kind of pay attention when you're doing a cloud native application, and then always be architecting, right? So especially in the cloud, things are constantly changing. So you want to keep yourself abreast of all these technological advances, or soon you'll be like left in the dust. Okay, now services. So far, these applications that I've built have no dependencies, right? So I go to my PHP application. It is fully functional all by itself, but that's never the case. There is a good chance that my Node application will need some kind of a database, or it may need some service it will need. So how does that all fit into Cloud Foundry, right? So Cloud Foundry has what is called a marketplace. So depending on who you've signed up with. So right now I just signed up with SAP Cloud Platform because it's easy to sign up. There is no credit card or anything. It's 120 days free trial. So if you want to use it, it's easy to sign up. But you can sign up with anybody. You can sign up with Pivotal or Azure or AWS. But everybody has what is called a marketplace. Now here in the SAP Cloud Foundry, so you can see that there is a marketplace, and just like the name says, it's actually a market. So you have all these services that are available for you, and all these services have different plans in them as well. Like you may have a gold plan, a bronze plan. My account, my trial account, doesn't have all the services that are offered, but chances are whoever you signed up with, they may have a MongoDB here, and there may be a free version, but SAP doesn't have it, or at least my account doesn't have that. So let's say I go to HANA database, right? So this is our flagship database. So let's say I want to use it. I go here and I click on it, and it has like a couple of plans, and the plan that we always use is HDI shared, which means this HANA database is shared by everyone, and it gives you a small slice of it. And what you can do is you can go into instances and create an instance of this marketplace, of this service. So I already have two, but I can create a new one. So in your case, say if you wanted Mongo, you would go into the marketplace and you would go choose Mongo and then create a new instance. So you click new instance, and the plan, so Mongo, you may have like a bronze, whatever plan it is. Choose the plan. Typically choose the free plan if you're just playing around. Say next. You can just say next. I can say next here. All you have to do is just give a name. So I'm going to say my HANA, right? And this will create me an instance of the HANA database. But if you're using MongoDB or whatever service you're using, go ahead, just create an instance. And then what you do is once you've created the instance, you bind your application to this instance. But let me first go ahead and create this instance here. So you can see that I'm creating this instance. This instance is now being created. Now, I can do the same thing with a command line as well. So I don't have to go to this portal to create this instance. I could have done the same thing by running this command. So if I go into, I could have simply said CF. So you notice pretty much every command starts with CF. So that's their CF CLI. Create service. So the name is pretty self-explanatory. So you say create service. In my case, I wanted HANA. This HANA will depend. If you're doing MongoDB, then you will provide the name of that service. So in my case, it is HANA, and then the name of the plan, HDI shared, and then the name of the instance that you want to create itself. So in my case, it's my HANA. So I could have just run this command if I wanted to, but we went through the through this UI route. So whichever way suits your boat, you can do that, right? So I'm going to remove this thing. So now I have an instance, but it's by itself. Like this, we've created a database instance, but it's not doing anything. No one is using it, and so on. So what I can do is I can go into my application, because I want my application to start using this, right? So I can go into my application, and then there is my awesome node. I can click on it, this application, and there is this thing called service binding. Now, all this thing that I'm showing you on this UI, you can easily do on the command line as well, and I'll show you the command that you can run to bind the service. So you say bind service, and the service that you want to bind, actually, you know what, I'll go the other way around. So from the service instance, so I have the My HANA here. This is so much easier. So I go into My HANA. Right now, it's not bound to anything. Click on this link, bind instance, and it tells me which application to bind to, and I can choose the My Awesome node, and I save. So what it will do is it will bind this application or bind this service, this HANA service, to my application. I mean, although my application right now is not using it, but it can use it if it wants to. So right now in my Node.js application, all I have is just this endpoint hello, which just says hello from Express. But my Node application now has access to a HANA database if it so desires to use in the future. Now, let me quickly go to my slides. So this is how we do it. You go to the service marketplace, you provision a service instance, you do a managed, so this is called managed service instance. So these are services that are managed for you, like the provider, whoever you signed up for, Cloud Foundry, they have all these services for you. But there may be times when you have to use your own service. Say maybe you have a legacy Oracle database in your on-premise system or so. So what you can do in that case, you can create what is called a user-provided service instance, and then you can bind your application to that instance. One thing I did want to mention is, so SAP, this is SAP's Cloud Foundry, right? But I had already mentioned that Cloud Foundry is IaaS agnostic. It can run anywhere. So all, like SAP's Cloud Foundry itself is not run on SAP's data centers. These things are run on AWS or Azure. So SAP is like, you know what, since Cloud Foundry we can run on anywhere, we are going to run this on AWS and Azure. So I thought that I thought it's a cool snippet of information. Okay. So we've talked about managed service instance. We provision an instance, we bind it, and now your application can use it. Now, how can your application use it? How does your application know what is the name of the database? It needs to know the name of the database. It needs to know the username, password, and stuff like that in order to connect to this database instance, right? So you can do, the way it is done is your application, now that it is bound, it has what is called an environment variable. So all operating systems, you know, they have environment variables. So what Cloud Foundry does is it injects these credentials and stuff like that, how to connect to this database, into the environment variables of the container. Now, every application, every language, they all have we all know that they have ways of reading these environment variables. And because Cloud Foundry injects all that connection information into the environment variables, all your application has to do is read from the environment variables, and it can know how to connect to the database. So for example, if I do CFENV, this is going to give me the environment variables for my awesome node, because that's the name of my application. And you will see that there is this environment variable for HANA, and that got, you see there's this HANA, and it got injected into this environment variable. Now, from within your Node.js application, so every language has their own way of reading these environment variables. You can read these credentials, you know how to connect to the database, and then you can store your data and so on. So you're not going to have like a file on the system that says config value, this is the value to connect to the database. You want to go a little bit away from that, a little bit more sophisticated. Remember, I was saying stateless, so this is a cool idea. Okay, so that's how you are able to read the credentials for the services and be able to connect to it. So the life cycle itself, you create, you bind. Again, binding, we did it through the UI, but you can run it from the command line. Or another cool way of doing it as well is, remember we have this manifest.yaml file. I can go in here and let me just get the right thing. You can add like a services instance, and you can just say my HANA as well. So here you can do something like this. And then when you do a CF push, it will automatically bind your application, your HANA, your node application to this HANA database. So we looked at creating and binding. Now unbinding and deleting is, say your application, you're not using it anymore. Then you want to unbind it and delete that service instance, because I mean, it is, if you're using the free instance, it's fine, but if you're going to do like the paid instance, why keep paying, right, if you're not using it? So we'll kind of look at Buildpacks. I think I'm at the top of the hour. I can stop now. I have a few more slides. It depends on how interesting everybody feels.
I'd say go on, Milton.
Go on. Okay, so I'll try to speed it up a little bit. Okay, so Buildpack. I want to talk a little bit about Buildpack. So Buildpack is what builds your container images, right? It builds what is called the droplet. So that's the term that they use in Cloud Foundry. So you have the stage app. So this is the step 7 is where you actually, the droplet gets built. And the Buildpack does all this, right? It gets all your application bits, your runtime. So if it's a Java application, then it brings in the JRE. It creates any libraries that needs to be run. It creates pretty much the image that needs to be run. So Buildpacks are responsible for this. Now, Buildpack has 3 main APIs. So first is, hey, can the Buildpack, can it stage the application, right? So we ship, every Cloud Foundry instance will have like a limited, like a set of Buildpacks. So if I go CF Buildpacks, so you can see that there is all these Buildpacks that SAP has in their Cloud Foundry environment. But you can build, you can bring your own Buildpack as well. So if your language is not here, say you have some weird language that it's not there, then you can bring your own Buildpack as well. And what it does is it goes through your application, goes through the list. If it knows it can build, then it will run, it will stop. So it will, if we say right here, if it says, if it figures out .NET is the Buildpack that needs to be used, it will stop there and it will start using the .NET. So that's the first one, to detect whether it can build, and then it does the compile. That's where it actually builds the droplet. And then it does a release, like how can I run this application, right? So different applications have like commands that need to be run to start the application. So the bin/release, it creates a YAML file with information on how to run the application. So that's the Buildpack. The service broker, so there is what is called the service broker API. Now, if you think like this is magic, right, like where it shows all these services on the marketplace, that's because they all have, they all implement this service broker API. So there are like some APIs. So if you implement all those APIs, then you can show your services here as well. And it's just REST-based API. So your data or your API management service can reside anywhere, but it, as long as it implements those REST-based APIs, then it will show up. So it's not like it has to be inside this Cloud Foundry environment. It can be pretty much anywhere. Again, there's a couple of things that it does. One is the catalog management. That's these where it shows in the UI where it shows the different plans it has, where it allows you to create and so on, then I mean, the API, right? The API needs to also have a way of provisioning. So that's where you actually create an instance. So it needs to implement those APIs. There needs to be an API for deprovisioning it. There needs to be an API for binding and unbinding. So we saw how we can bind and stuff like that. So those are because they've implemented these service broker APIs. And again, these are pretty they are open, right? So anyone can create a service and can be implemented. And I'm quickly going to look at the last thing is I want to look at the load balancer, router, stuff like that. So in traditional, like right off the box, this is how it is. Your client application, it makes a request to the load balancer, it sends it to the router, and router figures out where to send it, right? So there's a load balancer sends to the router knows where to send the application. Now, there are stuff you may want to do in addition to just authentication. You may want to do, like, say, if your application, like, say there's like, there is like a denial of service attack, right? Like somebody is like bombarding your server with requests and stuff like that. So you may want to implement rate limiting, logging, caching. So these are stuff when you're building cloud applications, you probably want to implement. So the way you do that in Cloud Foundry is instead of the router sending the request directly to the app, you can have this route service that takes care of all of this previous stuff that I showed, this rate limiting, all of this stuff. And what it can do, this route service can do all of that for you. And the route service itself can be from the marketplace. So the marketplace can actually like provision this route service. And then the route service, once it's done its job, say if there are 100 requests within 1 minute, then it probably denies it. But say if it is if it validates the request and everything is good, it can send it to the load balancer again. Load balancer will send it back to the router, and now the router will send it to the app. So there are like some header values that tell the router that, hey, it has already gone through the route service. This request is golden. You can send it to the app, and you can implement stuff like this as well. And I think, and like I said, this route service itself can be from the marketplace. You can pull something from the marketplace from the service broker API. So these are.
Does it also?
There are some.
Does it also do the authorization?
So the authentication can be done here as well. Authentication can be done. Typically, authorization, the app may have some. We need to know what the app wants to do. Like the resources are controlled by the app usually. Anything that is usually required of the route service, it can do. So this is a cool way of handling everything to this route service. Let the route service do all this work. And like I said, this can be provisioned by the service broker itself. Now, this is, like I said, is like 3-4 years old. So these are the companies. So on the Platinum, you see there's Cisco, IBM, we are all, and SAP is a Platinum member as well. One thing with Cloud Foundry is the more you contribute, the more you can direct the future of Cloud Foundry, right? There are big players behind Cloud Foundry, no doubt about it. And lately they have been using, I did mention that they are using the Kubernetes engine. Because Kubernetes seems to be the market leader. So just, I think, last month or 2 months ago, they switched their engine to use the Kubernetes engine. So all the more reason to use Cloud Foundry enough. Okay, I went like 10 minutes over, but do you have any questions?
Hey, Milton, I have a few.
Okay.
So you, when you showed the cockpit screen,
Yes.
is that SAP specific or is that something with the
Yes,
Cloud
it is
Foundry
SAP.
term?
It is SAP specific, right? Because I signed up for my Cloud Foundry account in SAP Cloud Platform. But if you go to pivotal.io and if you sign up for their Cloud Foundry offering, it will be the same. I mean,
Okay.
the UI will be different, but everything that I showed you will be the same. So they will have a marketplace. They will have a way of provisioning an instance. So from the marketplace, say you want to use one of their services, then you you provision an instance, and you can use this command line as well. If you don't want to go to their UI at all, you can do everything from the command line. So like I said, you can simply do CF create service instance, and you can, if you know the name of the service instance and stuff like that, you can just type it in. You don't even have to go to the UI, but the UI will be different, but the concepts will be the same. You'll find a marketplace, you'll find a way to create an instance, you'll find a way to bind that instance to the application. Everything else will be the same.
So then to start using Cloud Foundry, one, I need to, like, whoever my cloud provider is, like say for example AWS, then I need to go there and create a Cloud Foundry account for me and install the CLI on my local. Those are the two
Yes,
things.
exactly. Yeah, and I strongly recommend using SAP. The reason I say that is it's a lot more easier. They don't ask you for credit card and stuff like that. I mean, yeah, I mean, you can use whatever provider you want. Yeah, but like I said, with SAP, there's no credit card. You don't have to pay for credit cards. And little bit I've found it easier. I signed up for Azure one time and it looked weird to me, so I didn't even use it. Yeah.
Okay. And so
Or
then
you can also try Pivotal. I haven't tried Pivotal.io. Yeah, but you can try them also.
them also. Okay. And so you were saying that it downloads those packages when you do CF push. So where does it download the package from? GitHub or Docker Hub? Where?
So the Buildpacks are actually somewhere in the cloud itself. So these are the Buildpacks that they have, but I don't know where it is stored in the cloud. So the cloud controller has to pull it. I mean, it's not downloading. It's already there. It's just pulling it into the system and trying to figure out whether to use it. But if you specify your own build pack, like we did here, then it will have to, like, where is the command line?
Yeah, I saw that you kind of got it from GitHub.
Yeah, GitHub.
So you could also, like, if it's an NPM package, you can put the NPM package path here, is it?
No, those things it will automatically pull it. So say if you put like
so
a
if you
package.
don't specify, like it downloaded PHP, right? Where did it download from? Was it from, like, where is that store of? Like, is there a Docker Hub or NPM or GitHub? Or does Cloud Foundry has its own hub where it looks for the packages? You see what I'm?
So let's say Node, right? I understand Node a little better. So I have, say I have Express dependency, right? So the build pack knows to run the command npm install Express and pull Express from the npm repository.
Okay.
Yeah, so it does that for you. Like, I don't have to worry about for it to install Express. So I can have any number of dependencies here.
Okay.
Is it taking from, like, internet, like if there is no internet access or something in the organization, so where it takes from?
Yeah, if you don't have internet, I don't know how it can. You can build a cloud native application.
Yeah, then I don't know how the cloud will work. Yeah.
But
that's a big drawback.
Well, the thing is, you can install Cloud Foundry on any infrastructure, right? So if your application, say if you're building your own rack, your own stack for Cloud Foundry. So you've already installed Cloud Foundry and everything, so you push everything. So that machine somehow needs to go to the internet to be able to get Express and stuff like that. Yeah.
And the login that you had done, like in the very beginning from the command prompt, so was that login into your SAP account or to
Yeah,
Cloud?
into my
Okay,
into
SAP
my
account.
to my SAP Cloud Foundry account. Like so
Cloud
when I
Foundry
yeah.
account.
Yeah, so so what you do, like you told me, right? So two things you need to do is you create an account. It can be from any create an
Provider.
CF, yeah, any provider, and then install the CF CLI. So those are the two things you need to do, and then you're good to go. Then CF push is all you need to know.
Okay. And I just have one last question and then I'll let others ask. So on one of the slides where there was that Diego and at the bottom there was backing services.
Yes.
So what is Diego again? Sorry if I missed. And what can you speak a little bit more about backing services?
Yes, so backing services are the managed services that I was talking about. So these are the services that you see in the marketplace. So if you go to the marketplace, you will see, like based on the cloud provider, right? You will have whatever the services that they offer. They may have IoT services, they may have machine learning services. So they'll have all these services that you can use. Like say your application needs some kind of machine learning service. You can just go and say, oh, you know what, I'll take one of that, and then you take that and you bind it to your application. So that is the backing service. And these are managed provided. That means the cloud provider itself is providing it. But you can have your own user provided instances as well, user provided services as well. Now the Diego, this job is so once the build pack completes, it creates a droplet. So that's the name of the image that they use. And it puts it into the blob store. Now, Diego finds like cells that are free. And then we need to deploy it. And Diego pretty much just takes it and throws it into some place and starts the app, starts the container.
So Diego is like some sort of engine for Cloud Foundry?
Yeah, so
Like,
that's
what
the
is
one
it?
that, yeah, so that's the one that takes your images and makes sure that it runs on some. So if there is a container that is not working anymore, right? It stopped working. So Diego will detect that, and it will go to the blob store, pick up the droplet, and put it in a new container
Oh,
because it needs to make sure that the recovery happens, right?
okay, got it.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much, Milton. It was
Yeah,
very good.
Any other questions?
And I think you mentioned something about the load balancer, like we can configure inside it in the Cloud Foundry, right?
Yes. Yeah, you can. So if you look in their documentation, you can go into CF and see how you can configure it. I have not really done too many configuration of the load balancer. But if you go to Cloud Foundry and then documentation, so it gives you all the stuff that you can configure, right? So read the docs. Where the hell is the like how you can install? Like I said, you can install it anywhere you want, but I just go ahead and create an account with the provider that's already there. But it should have running Cloud Foundry. Yeah. Yes, but somewhere here you will have information on you can do logging metrics. I didn't talk about logging metrics. I didn't talk about a lot of stuff, but you can do all of that stuff as well. And one other cool thing that I did want to mention is, let's say we have two applications, the Node and the PHP, and let's say the Node application wants to talk to PHP. So you can create PHP as a service instance as well as a user-provided service instance. So you can create so you can easily create PHP as a user-provided service instance, and then in the manifest.yaml, let's say you call that as PHP endpoint or something, then you can call this PHP endpoint, and then the Node application will be bound to this PHP application, and it can now use this PHP application. I hope that kind of makes sense. So that way, the microservices architecture, you can have like multiple applications, and they can all talk to each other by just creating each of them as a user-provided service and having them interconnected. Okay, so if we don't have any other questions, I guess that's it from my side. I hope it was helpful.